everybody.
be
I
live.
am Chris.
Is it live on YouTube?
Yeah, it's live on YouTube.
Okay, updating
Okay.
stuff worked.
We just had to restart the system. That's it.
Hi, everybody. For those just joining us, I am sorry we're 40 minutes late. We had a slight weapons malfunction.
It was
Technical
me.
difficulties.
I forgot to update my computer. Any security geek would smack me, and rightfully so.
I'm
know
already
better.
hacked in now. It's too late, Edison.
Ah.
Anyway, we are here back again with Rick from Shrimply Explained. Hello. And we are going to cover some more topics and such. Before I forget, though, I don't want to say we have a small announcement, but we might be losing one of our regular contributors due to time constraints.
Well, we also, with that, we might also be changing the stream day too.
We might be changing the stream day, which is another part of that. But because of all of that, we're actually going to start looking for another person to join our podcast. So if you would like to do that, please reach out to us.
Wait, who's leaving?
Me, possibly.
Kyle, what?
If the stream day changes, it might affect me being able to be on here. But we'll see. I don't. We still got to talk with.
You only have
the
two
right person.
kids, two businesses. Like, come on.
Yeah,
What do you mean? You're so selfish.
Yeah.
You guys originally like Friday nights, and I was like, perfect. It like fits in my 7-day schedule. Run around and touch on my bases. But I don't know. We'll see what day we come back or day of the week we come back with, and I'll see if I can make it work. I don't want to leave.
Yeah, and I don't want you to leave either.
Yeah.
You keep
Where
us
would
on
we-
topic.
Who? Yeah, we need somebody to keep us on topic and talk about plants.
Well, maybe it's like I can jump in like a once in a while thing. Maybe do that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We haven't got there yet, right?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay, let's go. Are you ready doing the articles?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We did this one, but just in case we got cut off and we didn't know, we're going back into articles. First one was about an ancient shark found. We already talked about that. If you missed it, too bad. The second one is a tanker full of trout. Was it trout?
Salmon.
Jackknife plops over, dumps its load, and a bunch of salmon go jumping into this river. I'll pull the picture up again. This is crazy. So then you get this massive release of salmon into this river. And we've talked about it in the past. Look at this thing. Like, could you imagine you're a fish chilling? You're like, I'm just chilling in this big tank. We're all hanging out. Boom. And it said that most of them made it into the river itself, but some of them perished. 25,000 died.
Yeah. They had to be so lucky that all of them, like the whole maid was actually at the right spot for them to leave too.
Well, yeah, I mean, what if
Everything had
that
to go
dumped
right.
out on some like freeway in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah. No,
Like,
that wouldn't have ended well.
yeah.
That'd have been really stinky.
So we joke about people like maliciously tossing a bunch of fish into a natural ecosystem. But like, I would assume because they're being stocked, I would assume they're being stocked or sold.
Yeah,
that they're
especially
local
in a
food.
truck like that. There's no other way that would not be being for stock for sport fish. And were they like, what kind of salmon were they? Were they Chinook? Were they like
Chinook?
Yeah, so the Chinook salmon is the most common sport fish basically in the entire United States right now, at least. But they're also listed underneath the ICUN as a endangered species too, which is weird.
So you guys, some people like float bags and do drip acclimation and stuff.
I know. I watch this video all the time.
This makes me laugh so hard. It's like,
yeah, it's amazing how
drip acclimate them for 17 hours, and I drip acclimate my water changes. Department of Game for Utah.
I guess also
right.
like a part of that too is the fact that a lot of the rivers and tanks that they dunk all of these fish into are very oxygen rich because it's so cold
Oh, yeah.
comparably to our home aquariums, and so there's probably less of an issue for them as like survivability immediately, right? But
Interesting. I don't know. I use it more as a troll than
I do it
anything
too.
else
Oh yeah, it's
because
super
it's
great.
like, yeah. And I don't know, Rick, you can contest to this. People, do you drip acclimate? How do you say that? Do you drip your water changes in your shrimp tanks?
I mean, yeah, why not? Just safer, easier. Just put a bucket up there, get it dripping in. You can.
Okay, let me ask this question
but
then. You see a problem in not drip acclimating?
depends. That again. Well, okay, wait. So are we talking about water changes or acclimation?
Water change.
Oh, I mean, again, it depends on what your tank's at, what water you're throwing in. If it's going to cause like less than a 5% change to any one of your like parameters, that's kind of what I would use. So if it was like less than 5% of the volume, throwing some RO water in at that time, probably not going to do anything.
Yeah.
If it's more than that,
we
you
gotta
might.
send Rick a shirt. That's what I've just found out today.
What?
We gotta send Rick a shirt.
Okay,
One of
I'm a
the
little
shirts.
concerned.
Did you order them yet?
He just said
No,
our
not yet.
catchphrase.
He just said our catchphrase 4 times.
Put another one on. I'll pay for it. I can order them actually
Wait.
and just put them out of my.
What's the catchphrase? I missed
So it depends. Because
Okay.
it's like everything in the hobby is it depends, right? And that's kind of the frustrating thing for those starting out is like everything depends on what and to be able to navigate all that. So finally, I was telling Chris in Edison, I'm like, just get a shirt with the logo on it, and it depends across the chest because we need to be like it depends.
And then we
If you're
should get like
doing it right, it has to be. It almost has to be. It depends. But I think that there are a lot of people who on YouTube who do not say it depends. They're pretty set about it, and so like this way, yeah.
Well, and I think that's the cool thing about this hobby is that it's not just set in stone and we know everything. You know what I mean? It's like this hobby is still growing and still we're all still learning about fish. You think about like the nitrogen cycle. When they first started keeping aquariums, they didn't know what the nitrogen cycle was. They just knew that sometimes when you put fish in a new tank, it's not good.
Yeah.
And
the hobby has changed.
The hobby has evolved, it's changed, and there's still a long way to go.
This is true.
I kind of hope everyone are like approaching their tank and like if you look at it for a minute, you're probably going to have a new question that may or may not have been answered. And so it doesn't take you long to get to that point of where we don't really know and things are not as clear. So it's fun. Hopefully more people get there, and so we keep pushing that limit further and further away. But we'll see.
Sure.
I think the hard part is when people say Google it, and like Google, you can find that coffee has properties that'll make you live longer, and then another article that says you're going to die if you drink too much coffee, and it's like worse to some degree in the hobby because there's not a lot of more creditable type sources, websites, information. Well, this is why I tout a lot now about Shrimply Explained, is because the amount of time and research that you do to make it creditable versus there's still websites, big ones. I can't remember. I'm trying to think of one of the names, and I guess I don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Yeah, don't worry about
it. Seeds and things like still promoting to plant those, and you can just immediately throw fish in with it, and like just stuff that you're like, you guys have been around so long. Like, why are you? It's like clickbait basically to get ads on a website, but it's hard to find good creditable sources versus just going on to Google and they tell me I could do instant cycle of a tank if I just do XYZ. Like, anyways, go to simplyexplain.com.
Appreciate the shout out.
Shrimp. This man will set you straight. Next episode.
Well, yeah, one of my big examples of misinformation in the hobby is pea puffers. They are still really misunderstood, and to the degree that most people who keep fish and know a lot about fish will still get on internet and find information that says, oh, keep them in single in a 5-gallon, they're great that way. It's not great that way.
There's a lot of it. It's rampant. I mean, you find 5 sites that all contradict themselves.
Mhm.
Like go and try to Google.
Yeah.
I was doing this with someone else. Water parameters for discus fish. It's like all over the place, man. And then it goes back to it depends on whatever they were bred in. Are they, wild caught discus or are they farm discus that were kept in a higher GH? Like, yeah, it's hard. It makes it difficult, and it's frustrating too for I guess for me because sometimes I'll go in these groups, Rick's in them too on Facebook, and you just get people arguing with you 24/7. Most of them kind of know what they're talking about, maybe enough to kind of argue a little bit, but it's like they don't have a full understanding of the entire system or whatever they're talking about. But I don't know. I guess.
I know you're on there a lot, having fun debating people. It looks like
Having fun is what you would say.
Slamming your head
Right,
against the
Kyle,
wall.
he's there a lot. I hope you're having fun.
I am. I do enjoy it, and
Good.
I try to bring. Well, I try not to upset anyone, and I don't make it personal. And a lot of times, people will get personal immediately, right? And it's like I want a place where we can discuss things because there's stuff that I learned. Like even this week, it's better to put an RODI unit after a water freshener or a water softening unit than it is before because it's easier or less hard on the system to deal with ions than it is on an RO membrane, which is more expensive.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Learn that.
Good to know.
And I came on like, hey, this is what I think it should be. And the guy came in and we had a discussion, totally polite, and schooled me. And I'm happy to be schooled. I want to learn more so that I can help others. But like some people just get toxic like real quick. So it's like I want to be able to challenge people and I want to be challenged. That's how Rick and I met. Because it helps the hobby. It helps everything along. We talk
Yeah.
about
I think that's a
learn from each
story
other.
I need to hear. We all need to hear this story, I think.
Oh
I don't.
no, we go back and forth with like I think. Well, he saw
What was
something
it?
that I did that it was my algae guy. You reached out. You were like, "Is that an articulate?"
Oh
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
like-
It was all
yeah.
because I knew you're articulate.
Yeah. So we met like
Storyline
that,
there.
and then too, even to this day, Rick and I challenge thought processes or ask a lot of questions, which are good questions. Is it's like, as Rick stated, you ask enough questions, then you hit a wall to some degree, right? And then you're in the I don't know anymore. So it's good to have people questioning things that maybe we once knew were truth that maybe aren't truth any longer, or we were holding on to truth and the hobby's moved on and we're still stuck at, you need to do X, Y, Z. So that's why I'm in these groups is one to just to educate. I don't really sell anything. And question the hobby, question other people, question thinking. A lot of times the people that I'm debating with, I'm not interested in changing their mind, but I enjoy those passing by to be able to read and like because people will pop up 6 months later and we're like, I've been following you, like, and it's
A little
it's
scary.
cool. Like, no, like
I know.
I'll even see it in Facebook. Someone will be like, John's following you now in this group, and it's like cool. But it's like I'm able to help others become successful quicker, and I think that's an amazing thing. You know what I mean? Like to
Definitely.
bypass some of the frustrations that we have in general. Okay, long rant. Sorry. Want to do
Next
another
article.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to the next article or just move on to questions?
I don't know.
There's
You
only
tell
one
me.
more. It's kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
Tell me.
We can do it quick.
This one's a pretty cool one. This one is an aggressive fish, an Indonesian fish, when made angry, changes colors.
Ooh.
Straight up. Check this dude out. He oops, not that button. He
Hmm.
I swear I need glasses. This guy, I guess. Basically, when you put him in a heightened sense of aggression, his back area turns black. And they did this test with him.
Interesting.
Something to do with algae covered tanks and some females, and they were able to replicate it when the male was getting upset in some of these scenarios. Do they even show it? They don't even show him changing color. Whatever,
Boo.
people. I just thought that was super interesting to visually see aggression in fish, other than maybe darting of some sort. But dude actually changed colors. Celebs Medeka.
Isn't that a type of rainbow fish?
I don't know. This thing here, you can pronounce that.
No, okay, sorry. I'm thinking of a different
It's a type of rice fish.
Rice fish, okay.
Yeah.
Because some of
Yeah.
those little rainbow fish, like the Celebes rainbow fish, look a lot like that. Kind of look like the rice fish, like the
Yeah.
blue eye
Yeah, it does.
rainbow fish, and those little tiny ones.
I'm
Okay.
curious how they control that pigment. It didn't look like the article really went in depth on it, so I might have to see if I can find the research paper and actually look it up. But yeah, I know. More
I'm
research to be
wondering-
done.
I'm wondering how the pigment is controlled. If it's controlled by like different types of like adrenal glands or like
Is there an echo?
a little bit.
That's what Rick was just saying.
Well, I know, but
yeah, he's
like
going into it deeper. Though. Very.
You know, I wonder how they control the pigment, though.
But yeah, so it's adrenal glands. Is that what some fish or other animals do?
usually, Kyle.
Not if
Wait.
they're glowfish.
No, when in most other like I guess mammals, a lot of their coloration and a lot of their like kind of like the way that they react to stresses is through adrenal processes, right? It's the
Sure.
same instance of like when we have a heightened sense of heart rate when we are stressed, right, as humans. And the same way that a lion or a bee would fan out its fibers out more so that way it can run faster and have better cooling properties. But yeah, in a fish, I have no idea how that would work, to be honest, but it'd be cool to see.
How do octopus do it?
I want to say it's like little cells that like contract and like expand that have different
That's what I
colors on
thought
them.
I remember. Yeah, a gland or a cell or something.
Yeah. It has to do with specifically their Hox genes that allow them to do that. And which, fun fact, we all have Hox genes as humans. So technically we have the ability to do it. We just have turned that off through evolution.
You just have to hold your breath.
Yeah, totally.
Turn white magically.
But surprisingly, octopus are not the best at it. Cuttlefish are, actually. So
How is that
yeah.
measured?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so cuttlefish, well, it's measured by the amount that they can change per second.
Gotcha.
But cuttlefish actually use it as a form and a tactic to hunt. So they'll use it to mesmerize crabs, and the crabs will
Nice.
literally basically the crabs will be like, "Holy crap, you're glowing in different colors," and then the cuttlefish goes.
Sucks them up. They do that. I was watching a video of one like going through the water, and it was like lines like going down them, like a marquee almost. It
Yeah,
was gorgeous. You know, it's like
Yep.
it's just a trip, and he's just swimming around doing his own little cuttlefish thing. It's cool.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Apparently there are ones that are like 18 inches or something. They
Yeah.
can get pretty
They get
big.
huge.
I'd love to go to Australia and dive with them. That would be a dream.
Yeah, even the reef
what
is
you
minimal.
really want to go do though is go to deep ocean and go get some nautiloids because those are freaking massive too.
How big can they get?
Nautiloids, they can get around 20 inches eventually. So,
Okay.
but they also have a shell. So, you know,
Mhm.
that shell's pretty big. So, but
All right, getting
Yep.
into questions.
Okay. Go for it
I'm
now.
I'm gonna start with a good curveball and something kind of complex, and you're gonna tell me it depends, Rick. But we're gonna do it anyways. We get this thing a lot in the questions, in the groups, in the FB groups, which is all my shrimp are starting to die one by one. My parameters are fine, but what is a troubleshooting process one could go through to help figure out what's wrong with the shrimpies?
before Rick begins, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, sir.
What does it mean by parameters are fine?
I think we're getting into that too. First off, yeah, never do that. Never just say your parameter. Fine. Makes
I
everybody mad.
require numbers.
Well, yeah, I find personally when somebody tells me that their water parameters are fine.
Never believe that.
They usually tested that 5 days ago or a week ago and don't really know what fine means. And
Or
so
just tested their pH
yeah,
with a
and
stick.
and it's like they just don't understand the parameters, and so it's just a beginning mistake that you'll hear, and so that usually marks somebody as like beginner.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's a pain to test it all and everything, and then like actually type it out. But if you're worried about your shrimp or your fish or your animals, you have to do it.
Step number one: do all the
yeah.
tests you have and post them so others can see
Exactly.
them.
I like it when people do photos of them specifically, like especially if they have the API drip kits. They
Just
just
tell me
post
what it is.
yeah, and I'm just like, ah.
Well, and then you also
Yeah.
need to give me the expiration date on the API drip kits.
Oh, that's going too far into
Yeah.
detail.
So what's step two? What's step two? My shrimp are dying. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, let's say they do give you their parameters and they are fine. Like, then the next step is kind of asking one. So that Corey from Aquarium Co-op, his first question is, how long has the tank been set up for?
Yeah.
And so
I've
that's
heard
a really
about
good question to ask. Along with right after that, have you made any changes recently to the tank? And so is there anything that might be stressing them out immediately? So if that's not the case, then and in tandem to that is also, are you seeing any other symptoms of stress? Are you seeing, what does the like body look like? It can be a little sad and gruesome to actually like describe it, I know, but it's important to look at your fish or your shrimp and see if you can see what like ick spots or molting problems for shrimp are the big one that I like super often. You can pretty easily see that just crack in their shell that unfortunately isn't, it's a sign of a problem. So then gives you a good idea whether it's GH, whether it could be some sort of bacterial infection, like there's muscular necrosis that makes the shrimp turn kind of clear, or sorry, makes the shrimp turn whitish, but it'll probably be losing color during that time too. So if you can actually be observing your tank and picking up any potential problems, that's great. At the same time, looking for parasites, any planaria is obviously a big deal. Hydra. Other than that, like leeches, I guess, are the other big thing that could be a problem. So
what are, because I know Neos can be bred in a very wide range of GH.
Yeah.
And from what it seems like, I think you posted recently, KH is a little more nominal now from what we're finding out, where it is more about the ratio of calcium to magnesium in GH. If someone's on a really low side of GH, let's say first they don't even post it, that's a big red flag that they don't have a test kit for hardness at all, right? Like, okay, go buy a test kit and post it. If they're on the low side, do you ever try to see if you can get more information on how they were bred, and maybe they were bred on the high side, or does it really not make that much of a difference so long as it's in an acceptable range?
I mean, again, so I know you often are saying like, get it to the breeder's parameters. I think it's much more likely that if they're in the same range, if they're in the right range or like a relatively healthy range, but especially that mineral ratio. And it's like, that's awkward. It's hard to test what your calcium and magnesium balance actually is. Like, no one knows about it. But that's where, again, RODI water is really helpful. And then just having a remineralizer or something that you can add to the tank. Anytime you have low GH, it's a good idea to have this, because no matter what your mineral ratio is, a remineralizer is going to make it better. It's going to get it closer to the right range. And so that's almost always good. As we talked about, like last time I was on, crushed coral, a lot of other options, they may have different percentages. Some can be all entirely calcium, almost. Some could be almost all magnesium. And so that could actually create more of an imbalance. But so it's a little bit tough to say. So I would, if anyone does have low GH, I'd almost always suggest to use a remineralizer. That's going to give them the most control, just have the best chance of making things better.
Yeah.
That being said, I've had like the kind of low range, like a minimum for shrimp for Neocaridina is like 4. And I go and keep them at 3. they're doing just fine in the 3GH tank.
Oh,
So
you
I
said
haven't
Pyridines,
I haven't
not
pushed
Neo.
it further than that, but
Yeah.
as long as the mineral ratio is fine, I'm tempted to think that that's the key. And so I haven't seen where that real limit to GH is, either low or high.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering. I wonder how far you can push it away from what they're used to. You know, like if they're bred in like a 16 or 18 Neos, and you drop them in a tank that's got 6, like a GH of 6, like is it more about the ratio or is it more about the hardness? But you know, that's something you have to like A/B test to try to get some sort of data out of. But
Yeah,
um,
that's the problem. I mean, hobbyists can think and observe things, but until you're running your experiment in triplicate, it's which most people can't do. It's hard.
And a lot of the times, what I find happens, what's happened to me in the past, what's killed off like randomly my fish. What happens is I'll put a new plant in the substrate, and I'm terrible at cleaning my substrate, and so it'll kick up some really nasty stuff. That stuff you can't test for. That stuff you can't figure out. You forget to put in your C-Chem Prime when you do your water change. And all of a sudden your fish are dead and there's no chlorine in the water. Well, you can't find it now because by the time the fish die, it's all dissipated.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of things that you can't test for. And then also on the other side, it's like, well, my shrimp are dying one by one. Well, how long have you had them? Oh, I just got them yesterday. Well, there's a lot of factors for that one.
Yeah.
it depends.
It depends.
Exactly.
Right. So it depends on like how long you've had those shrimp. Have you had them a week or have you had them 7 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, what are you keeping your tank at? Do you know it all?
Mine, I'm still getting my parameters like averaged first because I think for me personally, because I'm scientific in some ways, in most other ways I'm very ghetto. But I want to make sure that if I ever present a result, it's an average of multiple different like captures of that result.
Yeah.
Right now, the average is around a 7.8 and it's slightly hard. It doesn't have, I mean, it doesn't have.
Are you using
nearly
calcium
as-
carbonate?
No,
Okay.
no. Mostly because there's a mixture of shrimp and snails in there, so I want it to be as close to nature as possible. Because if I try to remove all the calcium carbonate, the snails suffer, and if I try to add calcium carbonate, the shrimp suffer. So for me, it's trying to get that balance for both of them to live in harmony. So
Are you adjusting anything within the tank as far as parameters go?
no.
Or are you just letting it ride and see?
I'm letting it ride until I can get a good enough average. And I have, well, okay. In my mind, I don't want that many standard deviations between my measurements. And so
Yeah.
once I start seeing that number shrink to almost 0, that's when I'm comfortable being like, okay, can I adjust it a little bit by here
This is
or
what
there?
it is.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
But
are
they're
you
happy.
specifically aiming for like 7.8 pH? You're saying?
Yeah, but that's also, I think I'm only aiming for it because that's what the water in our groundwater is here. And
Sure.
it's a lot easier to deal with when you accept pH as what it is. Because soon as you start messing with it, you have to already take into account everything else. So, you know.
But you're seeing that it's you're noticing it swinging throughout the day,
Not,
or what are you
not,
averaging
no,
it over?
yeah. So not pH specifically, but other types of variables like hardness and different types of GH and KH. Those do average not over the day, but every week when I test. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Why are
I
they
wonder what's changing in
changing?
your system, you know? 'Cause
I'm
it should
wondering
take
why.
relatively-
I don't want to say it might be the way I'm filling up, like refilling my water, because I do it with tap, right? But I do it on a tap that doesn't have an aerator on it, which means I could possibly just be putting like, hard lime scale kind of stuff into the tank, and it might be contributing a little bit, but I don't know.
And I've heard too, when water comes out of tap, it's out of a pressurized system. And when like if it's not aerated, it's coming straight out of a pressurized system, and it takes a while for the pH to adjust for some reason. And I don't know if it's because gases are being forced into solution and then it's off gassing when it sits, something of that nature.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe I should let my water sit for a while before I refill my tank and see what
Do
happens.
it. Let it sit for like 24 hours and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be
that
an
can
interesting
change pH
test.
a lot.
Yeah, I don't know how much. I know it can. I know too, like even out of our RO units, Rick, the pH right out of the unit is different than if you let it sit for a few hours. It like
Yeah, I
goes
don't really
out.
worry about that.
I don't either.
But
Well, and pH is one of those things that like just about everything affects it.
yeah,
Yeah.
pH of RO water doesn't mean anything.
Right. It just means it's water.
Yeah, it's true.
So it'll change to whatever.
Okay. So
Yeah.
trying to wrap this question up for
Okay.
newbies. Test 1 is test things, write them
Well-
down, send them to everyone so we can see.
Yeah.
Step 2, observe tanks. There are things that our shrimp can tell us. The bodies, they don't lie.
Yeah, it's
and
observing
memory.
every aspect of your tank, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything that you've done to it, everything that your shrimp are doing, everything that the environment is doing, whether that's plants. If you've got a bunch of plants dying, why are they dying? What are they releasing into the environment
Yeah.
as they slough off? What are your microorganisms like? Like trying to get familiar with those different colonies and knowing what's in your tank. So just there's a lot to observe there and like ask questions about. So that's a pretty big step, but it's like really it's a kind of only one at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
What
Keep a lookout for it.
So the next question I have, and this is just a curiosity question that is probably going to replace the question that Kyle was just about to say.
mhm.
But what would you do in an instance where you had like microfauna in a same tank with macrofauna that you can't treat for? So for instance, my shrimp tank, I have copepods and Daphnia, right?
Mhm.
And they run pretty unhinged because of the fact that the shrimp don't take care of them. But the things that you would dose or put in for Daphnia or any other type of microfauna would also affect not only the shrimp, but even if I put a beta in, the shrimplets are going to get it. So, what do you do for situations like that?
So for microfauna, one copepods, Daphnia, totally healthy, perfectly harmless. For shrimp. Shrimp actually do eat copepods. I don't know about Daphnia, but that's just, they're just picking up whatever they can and shoving into their mouth. Copepods happen to, whatever's there, they will eat. So will that control the population? Probably not. But in terms of population control, that's really just maintaining the right amount of food going into the system. Like if you don't, without any additional food, the shrimp are going to be the one, and probably the snails are going to be the ones that are taking advantage of most of the food. And so if they're all around that food, the copepods likely aren't. And it's only once those leftovers start getting into the substrate that you're going to start seeing more copepods and Daphnia appear. And that's a really good sign. It's a kind of a delayed sign, but still useful nonetheless to know that you're overfeeding, and that is you can probably cut down on it because the shrimp clearly aren't eating. Whether that's too much at one time, and so you could spread that same amount of food out over a longer time for the shrimp to enjoy it, or it's just way too much food overall. So
how much you feeding, Chris?
So what I'm understanding is that like copepods, Daphnia, basically any microfauna is basically just like algae. It's just an indicator that there's too many nutrients in the tank.
Depends. Yeah.
And again, algae is depending on the depending on the algae, you have a healthy tank if you have algae. You know what I mean? And so it's like it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's not necessarily a good thing, it's just a thing.
Yeah, and thank you. That makes total sense. One of the documents I had to do for PETA, they were asking me why the presence of pest cnidarians in saltwater tanks was a huge issue for the aquarium. And they're very similar to a lot of microfauna. They exist because there's overabundance of nutrients, and it's a clear indication of overfeeding. And so I don't have a huge copepod problem. I mean, they bounce off the glass every once in a while when I see
Sure.
them, but at least it's now reassuring that I know I'm not overfeeding my shrimp to get them. I honestly, I really want to get them to birth me some shrimplets, and so if I overfeed just a little bit, I'm hoping that they get the hint.
Yeah. Do you know what your tank temperature is?
It's at 78 right now.
Okay. So if you have buried shrimp, you're going to be seeing some shrimplets about 22 days from the time those eggs, from the time you first saw them.
Cool.
Roughly.
Now accepting bets. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this study actually had a really shallow, like narrow deviation. So it was like 22 days, or it might have been 21 days or something, plus or minus like 0.4 or so.
Wow.
So they actually release relatively like consistently
That's
for
pretty cool,
temperature.
man.
Interesting.
That's useful.
On the spot.
So yeah, let me go ahead and finish up here. So again, observations, you've got your microorganisms, you're hopefully paying attention to the health of your tank. You're observing how your shrimp's behaving. You have all your parameters. You're paying attention to how often the shrimp are dying. So a molting problem is going to be, you're going to see deaths every so often because they only molt once a month.
Yeah.
So molting problems are typically going to be some percentage of shrimp that don't survive. So if you have good conditions, 99% of them will molt successfully, but you'll still have potentially a few that don't, whether that's because of an age-related issue or what. But if you're having molting problems, you'll see it every few days to a week. So that'll be your period. If you have an actual, like a more like tank stability issue, then okay, multiple shrimp will probably die throughout in the night or in one day observing it. So whether that's an ammonia spike, whether that's, I mean, if you put a plant in copper poisoning, they'll be dying very quickly.
Yeah.
So once you are more familiar with like how long it takes for something to happen, then you have a much better idea of how to diagnose everything, right?
What it could be from, yeah.
Yeah. And then let's see, I'm sure I'm missing something there, but because there's always more to be taking in. But the last possibility is that the shrimp, like the tank itself, just isn't working. So this is probably one of the most frustrating things I can imagine in the hobby. But sometimes the right microbial communities just don't set up. And so breeders have this because they talk about it the most because they're setting up the most tanks. But basically, sometimes the tank just doesn't work. Their shrimp die regardless of whether they're doing the exact same thing that they are with all the rest of their tanks. Some sort of microorganism, algae, bacteria developed that wasn't healthy enough or like for those shrimp there. And so as soon as they move the shrimp to a newly set up tank, problems go away. So I don't know how to test for that exactly, but that's why the bacterial powders and stuff can be helpful. And that's where seeding your tank properly with some like plants or a filter from another established tank is really useful.
So you have a guide on your site about setting up shrimp tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And that can help someone get it set up properly the first time around, probably the closest to the most amount of success one could have. How does someone get to that?
Yeah, so let's see. It's on a decent number of pages. It'll pop up and be like, hey, a Neocaridina guide if you want to sign up for the email list. Otherwise, where did I put it actually?
I was like, can someone Google something and it pops up?
I can also, if you want to link it in the chat, I can actually put it on the description for the video.
There you go. That's what's
Cool.
up.
That'd be perfect. But it is in the shrimps. So it's in the shrimp school. And it's in my like Neocaridina 200 series, that's right now is the only thing that's in there. So the simple guide to cherry shrimp.
Get a link to Chris, because I think that'll help.
Will do.
That'll help a lot of people, especially just to have any roadmap in general. Another one I know of, which is old, and it is what it is. Dinah Wallstad Shrimp Bowl. She created a PDF that you can find. It's the first thing that comes up when you Google that.
I gotta check that out.
It talks about setting up more of a no kind of father fish, no water change kind of thing, which I'm not a huge proponent of. But again, more so just starting with something rather than nothing, you know. Um, I would almost say, dare I say this, I would almost say I would follow Rick's PDF more than I would Dinah Wallstead, only because
Wait, I gotta read it. Yeah.
her methods are how do I say this politely? From another time that the hobby has moved past to some degree. There are still truths in what she teaches, but I think as time progresses, we learn how to do things in better, more efficient ways. I would say, not to say it's bad information, but again, another bounce off point to some degree.
You know, I
Anything
would
else
defend her
on
a
that
little bit
topic?
more. Just saying, like at the Science of the Planted Tank, the book that she released, like in the 1990s or so, that is still being updated.
Old.
Yeah, in the 1990s, so, like she's updating her citations every so often. Like it's still an incredible book to understand your ecosystem more. So cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah.
I when I first stumbled across it, I read front to cover in like the shortest amount of time possible. I'm not a reader. I'm dyslexic. I hate reading, and I just couldn't put the book down. It was cool. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that still rings true about aquasoils and mulm and like detoxification of heavy metals and like all this
Absolutely.
stuff that's so cool. So I guess I would also. It is worth a read. Ecology of a Planet Aquarium.
Yeah, there
Oh,
you go.
no. Yeah, Apology of a Planet Aquarium by Diana Wallstad. If you guys check too, a lot of your local libraries can and might carry it too. So instead of having to buy it, you can just go run over to a library and check it out, which is kind of cool. Okay, I think we beat that one to death. Do we want to do another question, even though it's getting kind of late, or do we want to get on to the big thing of the week, which is goldfish in small tanks and children in closets?
I'm happy to talk about children in closets.
We don't
That'll
condone
probably
it.
take up 10 to 15 minutes.
Rick's like, on that note, I'm signing off.
Bye.
What did I sign up for? Okay, I have the same question too. I don't understand how that works. We were talking about a little bit before whether or not it got on the last stream or not. But continue on the point of contention with the customer you had conversation with today, Edison, about keeping goldfish in a small tank.
Okay. Yeah, she was pretty adamant that goldfish do not get bigger than like the large feeder goldfish you see at the pet store. Right? In those giant overstock tanks full of goldfish, those large goldfish. She was like, that's the biggest I've ever seen a goldfish get. And I was like, well, how long did that goldfish live? And she was like, oh, a good 2-3 years. And I was like, no. You know,
What is their actual
goldfish,
lifespan?
about 25 to 50 years, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
don't say it's like koi.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
most
they are-
cyprinids are really long lived.
Yeah, so they can live forever.
She's whacking them off every year or two.
Yeah, and I don't care that they're surviving a year or two. They're not surviving their full lifespan. If a
Yeah.
person survives a year or two, that's not very good. You know,
Well, I fed them well.
Yeah.
I fed them well. They survived a year or two.
They survived at least a year. The baby survived at least a year.
Turn
But
the
yeah.
closet or turn the light on in the closet every so often to give them some stimulation. Like, what more do they need?
And then
You guys are horrible. All of you guys are just the worst.
It's hypothetical.
That's what makes it.
And of course, it
okay.
depends.
depends. That it's
It
hypothetical.
depends.
I don't
It
know.
does depend on the closet.
Yeah.
It totally does.
Yeah, it could be a very nice closet. I could
If
live
you
in a
think
millionaire
about it,
closet,
we
probably,
just
and be
live in
pretty happy.
closets. If you want to think about it hard enough, like a house is just a big closet.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah.
An aquarium
high
is just a large
closet.
bowl. I
True.
mean, what's the biorb if not a giant bowl?
So
anyway.
she's killing fish off early and saying it's fine. What do you recommend for
Personally.
a goldfish?
Comet goldfish, 75 or bigger, 75 gallon, because we're not in
Do you
the.
start out with them in that, or would you
can-
gradually
can
move up?
Start with them in a 20 gallon, sure, but in a year you got to move it out of there,
Yeah.
Mhm.
or else it's only going to last a year or two.
How do you know when it's like getting past the like size, getting like outgrowing the tank really?
Yeah, because
If it stays small.
I'm not a big fish guy too, and I ignorantly wouldn't know either, to be honest. I mean, I don't keep goldfish at all because I know they live forever, and because I know I'm ignorant, so I don't even keep them.
Well,
Yeah.
especially now at your age, they'd outlive you.
It's true. That's true. My kids would inherit a big old goldfish at this point.
Big old
Hopefully.
goldfish. Well, and the thing is, personally, I just like to play it safe. If I know it's gonna get that big, I'm just gonna put it in a tank big enough. Sure, it's small now, but it's not gonna
Yeah.
stay small.
Yeah, it's true.
How
It's like
big?
planting a
How big
tree.
do you need? How big do you need?
70
120 gallon?
75 or
200
bigger.
75.
Is that just for one goldfish? Like
75
can you
is
keep
like
multiple in?
you could probably keep multiple in there, but I'm talking like 2.
Okay. They just
And, like-
produce too much
What
waste.
if it's like a Siamese goldfish where like one is big and growing and then they got the head of another goldfish?
How
Like
many
popping out?
intestines do they have?
One, they share it.
Okay,
Probably
then it
fine.
would probably be the same thing.
You can have 2 Siamese goldfish
Okay.
in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Depends on the
On a
depends on the
positive-
intestine.
On
Gotcha.
a positive note, that 75 gallon would be heck of efficient for your power, draw because you don't need to heat it, which that's great.
Right. Because comet goldfish are actually cold water fish.
Yeah, most cyprinids are. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Right. And so, yeah, 75 gallon is probably the bare minimum for a 14-inch fish, right? And so, like, we sell Oscars too, and I've had that conversation with people. They're like, "Can I put that in my bowl?" I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
They're like, "But it's super small." No. And I guess the controversial topic is what size is adequate for a goldfish? Because 75 is really just my opinion. You can
Yeah, how
find
do you know? Where's the research?
yeah, and what
Yeah.
I guess the big question is what makes it the minimum tank size for a fish? Like a guppy, can it go in a 5-gallon tank? Can it go in a 10-gallon tank? What's the cutoff for a guppy or
Just
beta?
Google it. Just Google it.
Just
Okay?
Google it.
Okay, so I kind of want to give you, I don't want to say the it depends answer, but I'm going to give you the it depends answer in the fact that, so going back and pulling on the fact that I wanted to do something hobby related for my master's program, but I can't. The original goal for me was to improve on the data sets that Aqua Advisor uses. So they assign basically a class system to every single animal. They have 100 different types of classes, and the classes represent the amount of ammonia that passes through given a gram of food. And so they've taken this data from multiple different sources for multiple different fish, and they've deduced it down to eventually give us a measurement of ammonia per hour. You with me so far?
Yes.
Okay. So the issue with their data sets and the reason why I really wanted to explore going further into it is their data sets are 10 years old, and every single of those 100 plus classes were based off of 10 fish, not 30, which in my mind is not the best opportunity for at least scientific collecting, because the difference of 20 sample sizes is skewing your entire, like, all of your outputs completely, basically. Anyway,
Sorry, to clarify what you're saying, are you saying that for the 100 different like species or groups that they're
Yep.
actually like showing, they had 10 samples of each? Or are you saying they had 10 different fish that they then extrapolated to the groups related to them?
no, 10 samples each.
Okay, good.
And they assigned those different categories to
Okay.
it could have been other types of species that fit into those categories, but if it matched similar in size, that's what they assigned it to. But from their original data sets, when I talked to them, because I actually emailed the guys in China that made it, they didn't give me much of their original data sets, but they did give me kind of an example of how they did their experiment and how they did their data sets. And it was only 10 runs. It was 10 days worth of experiments per fish or per specimen or per species. And on top of that, they had to do it in not the best environment because they were on research study grants. And so they were all done in like 3-gallon aquariums. And so if we go to the whole a goldfish is a monster and eats what it can, is the concentration of ammonia will be higher in a 3-gallon aquarium than in a 75-gallon aquarium, which if you only do 10 samples of a 3-gallon aquarium and you're feeding them a gram of food a day, that's not, I feel like, a good representation of the amount of ammonia that would be produced over time within a specific ecosystem by a goldfish.
Sure.
So,
well, and that's assuming you follow the one school of method of the minimum tank size is based off of ammonia production.
yeah, and that's what their entire model is based off of, is physical space limitation, chemical space limitation, and behavioral space limitations. And so
right. So, even though a guppy and a zebra danio are about the same size, you can keep a guppy in a much smaller tank because of how active the zebra danio is versus the guppy. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like there's a lot of tank sizes that are just kind of grandfathered in, and just like, these are the tank sizes you probably want to do. And some of those are really good recommendations, some of those aren't. Like the beta, for example, we've started pushing that up a little bit to where 5 gallons is probably the minimum that most people can agree on, just because a beta isn't necessarily this poop machine like a goldfish is, but they still need space to roam. They have more advanced brain than like a goldfish does. It needs more space to explore. It needs more stimulation. It needs more things to interact with, where a goldfish just wants its peas.
Bowl in a China shop.
Right.
So all of this brings into question, how much of like their kind of limited growth in a smaller tank is due to ammonia production or some toxin? Like, do we have any actual evidence that's the case? Because I would think if you could easily test this by having a really good recirculating system, constantly replenishing it with new water, really strong filtration. And so what happens then? Can you keep a goldfish in a 20-gallon tank?
I feel like you could find data sets for this for salmon and other types of other types of sport fish, because those are the things that someone has already gone through and probably done a lot of that research with. And then you might be able to transcribe it into a goldfish of some sort. But for just a goldfish, I guarantee you there will probably be zero data sets for it.
Well, and a lot of the problem is a lot of the people who get goldfish and want to keep them in a 20-gallon tank aren't very scientific people.
It's true.
And so they can't just say like, oh yeah, my ammonia is high. That's probably what. No, they don't know what ammonia is. They just see a goldfish in a 20-gallon and say that's plenty of space because like it's a tiny little fish right now. Well, yeah, it's a tiny little fish right now, but it's not going to stay that way.
Yeah. Kyle, you've been awfully silent.
No, I'm soaking it in. The parameters in which they were doing the testing, there's a lot that goes into it. Like, and I guess I wasn't putting all of it together. Back when I started back in the 1900s, before Google was around, it was 1 inch of fish, 1 gallon per 1 inch, one fish, fish per gallon, whatever. Like super archaic. It doesn't take into consideration how much ammonia is producing, how active it is. Like it didn't go into any of this. You know what I mean?
That rule breaks down really quickly for big fish. So,
or even for small fish like zebra danios, they're extremely active, which means that they add to ammonia in tanks a lot faster than other fish.
Mm-hmm.
And
like a goldfish, right? 14 inches, that means 14 gallons, right?
Yeah, I know. I never used it. It was funny because that's what we used for how much we stocked, and I always did like half of that even. And then how much wattage we needed. We went off of wattage back in the day because we had T5s and halides.
What
Halide.
are
So it
those?
was like it what
Halide lights.
No,
halides.
I'm kidding. I just yeah.
I didn't hear
You're just
you.
old.
You're probably making fun of me. Shut up. Anyways, yeah, it was like 1 to 5 watts per gallon was like low light, 5 to 10 watts per gallon was medium light. It's like all this like really antiquated stuff. So, anyways, the reason I'm quiet is I'm listening to you guys and I guess absorbing it to some extent. But it's interesting. I don't. The further I've gotten the hobby, the more I've gotten away from fish in general. Because it's difficult, and I'm ignorant as heck, man. Like I really am. The plants always, I guess, drew my attention more the longer I've been in it. Having more of the aquascape setup, and then livestock to some degree, just kind of add movement to the art piece in which you've created. So I don't really keep fish tanks, so I too am just as ignorant, I guess. But I also know I'm ignorant, and then I don't get into the realm and try to play in the realm and like even pretend I even know. So
Well,
I'm, to be honest, getting schooled too, man. That's it.
oh yeah, and I think one of the biggest points I want to make before we make closing remarks is that regardless of the size of fish, it can always go in a bigger tank. A small fish
Sure.
can go in a big tank. A big fish can't go in a small tank.
Yeah.
And so if you want to put a beta in a 55, a single beta in a 55, go for it.
That beta would be so happy.
That would be like the happiest little beta
Swing the
ever.
castle.
And
Swing the castle.
and then depending on how that setup is, you probably could just get away with plants and Wallstead the heck out of that tank just because it would be a single beta. You know what I mean? And so it's like you can always put a smaller fish into a bigger tank, but not vice versa.
It
So
goes into that. You can't over filter, but you can under filter for sure.
Yeah. Oh
Yep.
yeah, 1000%.
Sure,
so
yeah.
you can always understock a tank, but it's really easy to overstock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So absolutely, totally true. But it is also just so interesting thinking about why something is actually happening. So like in theory, not necessarily for hacking, like for fish and whatnot, it's clear that if the goldfish is dying at 2 years, it's clearly stressed. But for like shrimp, it's a little bit different. They stay small when they have like a higher population, higher density. But as far as I know, they still live the same amount of time. And so how detrimental is it to have them in those conditions as long as the water conditions are good, if they're still surviving the same length of time and you're not planning to use them for competition? Is it how much of a problem is it? Is it abuse if you're keeping these shrimp and they just are a little bit smaller than they maybe could optimally grow for?
Well,
I guess there's some interesting questions.
I guess my question then would be, what's the death rates?
Yeah, because
Are you losing shrimp?
Yeah.
Are you losing shrimp faster than they're being born? Because that would indicate to me that they're being stressed out. But if they're healthy and you're actually growing your population and you're having to cull off some of them because it's starting to get to a point where like that's a lot of shrimp, it's probably a good sign that they're healthy and happy.
Aren't they? And Rick, you may know. I have heard this, but I have no way to prove it or deny it or whatever. I heard that they're almost like self-regulating in population, where they hit a certain density, and I don't know if it's chemically they're releasing something or by feeling or whatever, but you put a handful of them in a 5-gallon, and it's only going to get so dense, they're not going to overpopulate like maybe fish could, or if you have a larger tank, population is going to get a lot bigger, but it gets to a certain density and it's self-controlling. Have you seen anything like that before?
That's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, so as population density increases, their size does decrease.
Yeah.
And so
it's just a natural response.
Yeah. But why is that? I don't know yet.
Yeah,
so some of the studies on like farmed shrimp say that it's from food aggression. And so that like the larger animals come in and they start tearing, like they fight away the other shrimp, and then that causes so they get more their food, but then more of the food ends up being like dropped to the bottom of the tank or something like that. Or the other ones get injured and so they can't get as much food. But I don't think that's the case for the shrimp like in our tanks. So Yeah, is it some sort of chemical regulation? Could doing more water changes like increase their size even when you do have a lot in there? I think to some degree the population does regulate, so with size, but also as you get more shrimp, the biofilm, all the bacteria that they are eating off of all the different surfaces in your tank just can't replenish fast enough, would be my theory. And so even you can have babies, and so some portion of those will continue to survive, but it'll start to regulate to where maybe you have lower shrimplet survival, to where it kind of just starts to become relatively or the population, it kind of levels out over time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's usually what we see, at least in the research side of things, especially with invertebrates, is as they only have a certain amount of available food, they will start to regulate out, and you can't have that many shrimplets eat the same amount of food. That's just not possible, right? And so eventually die-offs do happen, in the sense that shrimplets just get eaten or they become part of the food source. It's just kind of the nature of at least invertebrates. But I think also on top of that, and this is something I guess we could say for the next time that Rick is probably here to kind of go deeper diving into it, but invertebrates in general are the most controlled out of their environments, instead of controlling the environments they're in. I mean that in the sense that you can put a fish in different types of waters perfectly fine usually, and they will regulate themselves to adapt to that water, where most invertebrates, shrimp included, but more specifically things like echinoderms and like starfish and that kind of stuff, they are codependent on specific parameters to change for the population, instead of individual changes within themselves. Does that make sense?
Are you basically saying they're like osmoconformers versus osmoregulators?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sounds good.
Exactly.
Cool.
And so when it comes down,
okay, wait. Well, let's stop. Just clarify. So osmoconformer, so let's say an osmoregulator is humans. So we are filled with liquid, but we keep it inside of us, and because there's no liquid around us, there's not the same concentration of water and salts in the air. So our skin is keeping that and controlling it. In contrast, some fish, or like, as you're saying, the echinoderms, like a starfish, it's an osmoconformer. So it conforms to the seawater around it. If that seawater is to change concentration of salt and everything, that changes the balance in that starfish. And so that can be really bad. But that's basically shrimp. So they are more confirmed. Exactly.
Yeah. But we'll get into it next time that Rick is coming. Yeah, sorry. We'll get into it next time when Rick comes on. But I think that's another big part of not only with shrimplets and also just a lot of invertebrates, is that their population has other controls that are outside of just being a shrimp. Instead of just like going through the cycles like fish do, they have other controls that control their populations as well. So
I love to hear about it. I know some of them, but I'm trying to research it, so it would be really interesting to learn more.
I want to learn as well.
We'll do an ecology lesson. On
that note, it's late.
Yeah, I think we went over, but it was fun.
It was good.
Yep, great talking with you guys. Time to go play some board games. Let's do it.
Nerd.
Yeah.
After we just nerded out about fish.
Yeah, I know. I was about to say, I know better.
I spent hours on shrimp today already on content and whatnot, so this is just relaxing.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us, Rick.
Thanks for hanging out.
Absolutely. I'd love to be on again. We can maybe, I'd try to make this more often, every other week or something. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, that'd be great. Once again, I am Chris.
I'm Edison.
I'm Kyle.
Rick with Shrimply Explained.
And thanks for watching Tanks and Thanks.
Tanks and Thanks.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.